vi kan se en mobilisering av svarta i Sverige idag, vilket gläder mig oerhört. Och mycket av den här mobiliseringen leds av ganska unga svarta kvinnor. Vi hämtar många av våra förebilder i USA, i kampen i USA, från medborgarrättsrörelsen till idag. Vi känner till organisationer som Black Lives Matter. But there are many different organizations working together. And there is one organization, Hands Up United. And I read on the internet, they call themselves a collective of politically engaged minds building towards the liberation of oppressed black, brown and poor people through education, art, civil disobedience, advocacy and agriculture. Och Hands Up United är en organisation i Missouri där också i en ort inte långt från Ferguson, där vi känner till att mordet på 18-årige Michael Brown, obeväpnade Michael Brown, skedde, polismordet. Och jag menar, de organisationerna jobbar ju mot rasism, mot polisvåldet i USA, det rasprofilerade polisvåldet. Och ofta så är det kvinnor i ledningen av de här organisationerna. And it's a very great honor for me to introduce one of, the leader of this organization, and it's Tara Thompson. I will say some of the words that I read on the internet. Tara Thompson, she is a truth teller, justice seeker, freedom fighter, griot, human rights activist, and she's a St. Louis native, and she's a magic black girl, and she's the leader of Hands Up United, and she's been struggling and organizing since 2006. Welcome up, Tara Thompson.
Thank you, Astrid, for that introduction. Small correction, I am one of the leaders of Hands Up United. There are 5 directors, and the rest of our help comes from volunteer. So peace to all of you. I'm honored to be standing here, spending a little time with you this morning. We're going to discuss human rights and how racism and classism are grand barriers to freedoms that we are all entitled to enjoy. Ferguson is everywhere is an unfortunate truth about the world that we currently live in. From Ferguson to Gaza, state-sponsored and sanctioned violence are an instance of clear human rights violations that affect poor and people of color at disproportionate and alarming rates. It became clear last year that the United States government has no robust centralized database for tracking people killed by law enforcement. Instead, they had a voluntary program that allowed agencies to report. Of the approximately 18,000 police agencies in the United States, 1,100 departments, that's approximately 6% of the agencies, reported a killing by an officer or a private citizen that is considered justifiable between 2005 and 2012. So that's 7 years that roughly 6% of agencies decided that they would participate in reporting persons that have been killed by law enforcement. I have to believe that this is no accident that this information is not being tracked. We're talking about a country that can launch a drone strike right now, as I'm standing here, halfway across the globe. A country that has this technology certainly has the technology to create a database. On October 5th of this year, the newly appointed U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch announced that a database would be created and confirmed with law enforcement agencies. So what that means is that they are going to scan public records, scan media reports, scan social media, and find reports of people killed, and then they're going to confirm it with the agencies. What is wrong with a government that has to seek information first and then come back and confirm with their police agencies? Knowing that this was an issue, this came about, the lack of this information came about last year after the murder of Mike Brown. So there were several other outfits, one of them, The Guardian, that created this project called The Counted. So this that you see on the screen is a map created by The Guardian, and it's powered the same way that the United States is planning to power their news system, by news articles, media, and the public. We can go onto this website and log information about police killings in our area, and facts involved, articles, links to the articles, etc., to keep this up to date. Oh, so these yellow dots, this is a map of the entire United States, and these yellow dots are instances that have already been logged solely for this year of people that have been killed by the police. 976 logged deaths of people in the U.S. killed by police so far this year. When I say logged deaths, I mean those that they've found out about. There are certainly instances of people that have been killed by the police that are not counted in this 976. That's close to 1,000 people that have been killed by the police this year. Over a month and a half remains in 2015, and I am equally confident and disgusted that this number will rise before the close of the year. The police in the United States use deadly force with impunity. In the U.S. this year, to my knowledge, there have been only 8 arrests of police officers. That's 8 arrests versus at least 976 deaths. This number does not include those who were said to have committed suicide in police custody or in any interaction with the police, such as the interaction that happened on October 28th in St. Louis between police and an 18-year-old boy. The police pursued him. He was said to have some mental health issues. His family was also behind him, his father trailing him in a car, and asked the police several times to back off because he had it. They did not back off. Instead, a chase ensued in a neighborhood. The neighbors report hearing shots fired, then a stop, and then one more shot. The report from the police is that he shot himself in the face. There was never any mention of a weapon until they needed to fit the story that he shot himself in the face. The press release that came out, this happened about 2 in the afternoon. The press release that came out at 6 p.m. from the police said that they pursued him. We still don't know why they were even following him to pursue him in the first place. They pursued him. He fired at them live ammunition. They tried to tase him. The taser was ineffective. They lost sight of him, and by the time they rounded the corner and found him, he had shot himself in the face. This is the story that the police tell. This is the one time the police in St. Louis would like for me to believe that they've done everything right. There have been unarmed people killed by the police, and they've never used their tasers. So I'm supposed to believe, as a citizen, that he fired live ammunition and your response was a taser and then to return fire. I don't believe that. When we talk to everyone in the neighborhood has the same story. The police are the only people that have varying stories. Ironically, when we get to the scene, Ferguson police are there. Ferguson police are the police who killed Mike Brown last year. Ferguson police should not be on the scene if, in fact, they are not involved. The chief of Ferguson police shows up to the scene And I asked him on video, did your officers shoot Mr. Green? He shakes his head emphatically no. When I ask him what department did shoot Mr. Green, he does not respond. I ask him, was it Normandy? He subtly nods, so subtle that I can't distinguish it as a nod. I ask him on camera, is that a yes or no? He does not respond. This is Mike Brown. On August 9th of 2014, in Ferguson, Missouri, in Campfield Green Apartments, Darren Wilson of the Ferguson Police Department killed Michael Brown unarmed. He was shot 6 times. Once in the top of the head, once in the eye, 4 times in the arm, and once in the shoulder. Again, he was unarmed. The handling of this situation by Ferguson police was incorrect from top to bottom. There are so many things that you will never get from the mainstream media, especially the mainstream media in the United States. Mike's parents were not allowed to approach his body. There was a nurse on the scene that was not allowed to approach him to administer CPR. She was threatened with arrest if she stepped any closer. Mike laid in the street for 2 hours before he was even covered with a sheet. His body lay. This is an apartment complex that from one side of the street to the other is probably about as wide as these stairs. You can be standing on one side of the street here and see clear across to the other side of the street here. So you have an entire community looking at a boy's body laying out in the street in a pool of his own blood for 4.5 hours, 2 of them uncovered. You have children walking around this neighborhood saying, what happened to Mike? These are children that look exactly like Mike. So what is the message that is being sent to a 3-year-old when a body is allowed to lay out like that? That instantly sends the message that his life is not of value. That is highly problematic. So when we talk about Campfield Green, this is a place that I spent some time in as a young adult, right? It's an apartment complex that everybody knew somebody that lived there at some point. Your aunt lived there, your cousin lived there, your homeboy lived there, somebody lived there. I distinctly remember as a young adult being with 4 of my friends and saying, okay, so we have to get in the car to get out of the complex, to get out of North County. Somebody has to take their hat off. Somebody needs to lay down in the back. It can't look like there's 4 or 5 people in the car. We're gonna get pulled over. This is the climate in this place. Also keep in mind, the media will have you to think that this is some land of terror. Mike Brown's murder was the first murder in Ferguson in 2014. The response to the community questions and subsequent outrage was terroristic at best. The response brought forth a number of issues, a major one being the militarization of the police made possible by 1033, media representation of Black victims, criminalization of Black youth, persistent and unchecked racial profiling, along with the occupation of poor and minority neighborhoods by police, and extortionary tactics by municipalities, to name a few. Mike Brown's death not only shook up Ferguson, not only shook up St. Louis, it shook up the entire world. I had the pleasure of going to Paris this summer and meeting a group that operated under the hashtag and the Twitter handle Ferguson in Paris. Before I'd even met them, they'd had their own protest for Mike Brown, and this is one of the images from that protest. Since Mike Brown was killed on August 9th of 2014, there have been 1,083 people, roughly, give or take a few, I would say killed by the police since Mike Brown. This is an action that my organization staged called Which Emergency in response to the St. Louis County executive declaring a state of emergency. We want to know which emergency he's talking about because I live in a constant state of emergency. As a Black woman in the United States, I live in a constant state of emergency. So, Steve Stenger, when you declare a state of emergency in my town, which emergency are you talking about? This fun little map. So St. Louis is made up of two major parts, St. Louis City proper and St. Louis County. St. Louis County is then further broken down into what was 92, now a little less than 90 municipalities. These municipalities operate like small cities. They each have their own police department, their own city hall, their own mayor, their own laws, their own fines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can imagine driving down one street in St. Louis and crossing at least 5 municipalities. This means encountering at least 5 different police departments. Again, all with different laws, all with the right to pull you over for the same broken taillight that you might have just gotten a ticket for 3 municipalities back. So when we talk about this being set up to be a debtor's prison, that's exactly what it is. It's extortion, it's municipalities' budgets being funded on the backs of poor people. Ferguson is 6.5 square miles. They have their own police department and city hall. Ferguson is 6.5 square miles. The population is roughly 25,000 people. 70% of those residents are Black. At the time of Mike Brown's murder, there were 53 police officers serving Ferguson. 3 of those police officers were Black. The population of this area is 70% Black. There is 1 Black St. Louis District Council member. Everyone else that represents Ferguson is white. So this is some of the municipalities, like top to bottom. So these are the top ones ranked by the area at the top, and then the bottom are the same, the lower ones ranked by the area. So if you look at the bottom graph, you'll see there's 6 municipalities there that are 0.1 square mile. Why do they need their own police department? Why do they need their own city hall? Why do they need their own mayor? A municipality called St. Anne, which is also known, all of the municipalities are known for targeting one group of people over another. There's a municipality called St. Anne, similar to Ferguson in their targeting. The difference is St. Anne is 71% white, 20% Black, 5% Latino, and 4% other. So if we talk about 38.5% of St. Anne's budget comes from tickets, is traffic ticket fines, 38.5%. That is very, very close to half of your budget being supported based on fines, based on traffic tickets, based on minor violations. You get tickets for your grass being too high. You can't pay that, it rolls over. It rolls over again. Same thing with a traffic ticket. You could get pulled over for not having proof of insurance. You miss a court date because you have a job. It rolls over. You miss another court date. At this point, you have a warrant for your arrest. A warrant for your arrest where you're going to be arrested and put in a jail with someone that could possibly be facing a rape or murder charge for your traffic ticket. If we're talking about the arrest rate in St. Anne, 25% of those arrested in St. Anne are Latino, 17.5% of those arrested in St. Anne are Black, and 6% are white. This is again in a municipality with 71% white population. When we look at the percentage of people that are searched when pulled over by St. Anne police, 20% of those searched are Latino, 14% of them are Black, and 5.6% are white. This is a town that has 71% white population. So, pop quiz. Where is this? This is 10 minutes from my house in broad daylight. This young man is trying to walk home. My tax dollars paid for this. So I'll talk about August 10th. I'll take a brief detour for a second and talk about August 10th. And August 10th was when I left the house. I went and occupied the street in front of the Ferguson Police Department with a lot of other people, not knowing what the action should be, what move we should make, but knowing that for sure there was going to be a move. August 10th marked the first of over 189 days that I went outside my house. Again, when you talk to people that live around here that are born and raised in St. Louis, and they say, Mike Brown could have been me, they mean it. When I say Mike Brown could have been me, I mean it. So I, like a lot of people, don't want any extra credit for going outside. I'm not a person that believes you should get extra credit for what you're supposed to do. If someone lays in the street, unarmed, murdered by the police in a pool of their own blood for 4.5 hours, your responsibility as a human is to go outside of your house. This lovely picture, you can barely see the police line because they're firing flashbang grenades, tear gas, and smoke bombs at protesters because they are ready to go home. It's funny because they would yell at us every night, "Go home." And our response is always, "We are at home, you go home." So if you didn't know where this was, where would you think this was? This has to be in a place of war, right? This can't be in a small town in St. Louis where an unarmed child has been murdered. This cannot be the response to people, to community, asking questions, asking for accountability from agencies that are supposed to serve and protect them. It doesn't seem like it should be the response, but it is. Again, this is 10 minutes from my house in broad daylight. You see the man on the top. I can't count anymore the amount of times I've had someone with a sniper rifle trained on me from the top of a militarized vehicle. These weapons are care of the United States government and the 1033 program. The program was designed to give surplus military weapons to urban police forces. Instead of destroying Humvees and MRAPs, they send them to Ferguson and other small towns. In Watertown, Connecticut, there's a population of 22,514. They have an MRAP vehicle, which has a sticker price of $733,000. St. Louis Public Schools just got their accreditation after not having it for over a decade. What else could we have used $733,000 for? These MRAPs are designed to protect soldiers from roadside bombs. There's never been a landmine reported in Watertown, Connecticut. Police in small towns in Michigan and Indiana have used 1033 to acquire MRAPs, armored troop carriers, night vision rifle scopes, camouflage fatigues, Humvees, and dozens of M16 automatic rifles. Police in Bloomington, Georgia, population 2,713, acquired 4 grenade launchers through the program. Police in Johnston, Rhode Island, population less than 29,000, acquired 2 bomb disposal robots, 10 tactical trucks, 35 assault rifles, more than 100 infrared gun sights, and 2 pairs of footwear designed to protect against explosive mines. They have 67 sworn officers. The Parks Division, the park where you go, take a nap, read a book, jog. The Park Division of Delaware, their Department of Natural Resources was given 20 M16s. Fish and Wildlife obtained another 20 M16s, plus 8 M14s and 10 .45 caliber automatic pistols. The Fish and Wildlife Enforcement received these items. Campus police. Campus police at the University of Louisiana in Monroe received 12 M16s. They have 8,811 students. So as a parent sending your child to school, how do you feel knowing that the campus police at your children's school have 12 M16s? I remember my campus police from undergrad, and I wouldn't want to give them a water gun, let alone an M16. The Warden Service of Maine's Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife received a small aircraft, 96 night vision goggles, 67 gun sights, and 7 M14 rifles. As a result of this program, this image is what my community looks like. Obama's response to inquiries about the program was that the majority of what departments were receiving were pins and helmets. Do you know how many Office Max, Office Depots, stores that sells pins I will pass between St. Louis and the Pentagon? Explain to me why the federal government through 1033 would be sending mostly pins and helmets to local police, yet my town looks like this. This is a graph of the value of tactical items distributed by the Department of Defense through the 1033 program. They've provided about $5 billion in equipment since 1990, mostly general office and maintenance equipment, but the Pentagon has distributed tactical military equipment worth more than $1.4 billion decimated in 203,000 transfers to about 7,500 agencies. Post-Ferguson, the program still continues. Campus security, as I mentioned, Parks and Rec, the U.S. federal government, which includes the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Department of Drug Enforcement, the Secret Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Department of Veteran Affairs are all recipients of weapons. The Department of Veteran Affairs processes benefits for veterans. Why do they need weapons from 1033? So what do you want to do when you get new toys? Because the first thing I want to do when I get a new toy is play with it. You get a new car, you want to go on a road trip. You get a new grenade launcher, you want to launch a grenade. This program and many of the actions of the United States government seems to me like the waging of civil war against United States citizens, primarily against United States citizens of color. Crowds full of children and pregnant women were converged on by police at the beginning of a 12-day no-fly zone starting in August after the murder of Mike Brown in the 37 square miles over Ferguson. Police told reporters at the time that the flight ban was put in place because police helicopters had been shot at. The audio recordings obtained by the Associated Press later on revealed another motive. The motive was solely to keep the media away. August 13th, I was out with many other people. The police pushed us back over a hill, turned a corner, and I have people trying to get to me on social media saying they blacked out the cable channels. We can't see you guys anymore. Where are you? We were on the street in a crowd of children and a pregnant woman when they began shooting gas, no longer in the air, no longer to disperse the crowd, but at individuals. So when we talk about Ferguson being a prime example of human rights violations, I can connect this. I can connect this for you. These are tweets that we received in August. You see one that says, Palestinian people know what it means to be shot while unarmed because of your ethnicity. There's another post here of a person holding a tear gas canister made in the US that had been shot at Palestinians days before while we were being shot with tear gas made in the United States and Palestine and Brazil. At least 4 types of chemical agents were used on us during protests. Some of which, obviously, tear gas has been outlawed for, I don't even know how long, by the UN. You're not supposed to use tear gas, period. It's outlawed. That didn't matter. Here are more tweets from Palestinians advising us on what to do. Run against the wind to keep calm when you're tear gassed. The pain will pass. Don't rub your eyes. Don't keep too much distance from the police. If you're close to them, they can't gas. Palestinians were the first people that tweeted how to make gas masks. So in 2007, George Bush, then president, and Israel entered into a 10-year deal that would give Israel $30 billion in foreign military assistance. $30 billion. At the completion of this 10-year plan in 2018, the U.S. will have given the $30 billion. They award the grant in one lump sum, unlike every other foreign recipient, which receives their payments in installments. Israel uses this money, this interest, to pay down the debt to the United States. In March of 2013, President Barack Obama pledged to continue multi-year aid packages to Israel through the year 2028. So if we're gonna be up to $30 billion by 2018, a full decade later, how much money will we have given to Israel to continue sponsoring the terror in Palestine that they sponsor in my neighborhood? Under the terms of the agreement, Israel will be able to spend 26% of the US funds on Israeli manufactured military equipment. This agreement is unique to Israel and has allowed them to grow to the world's 7th largest exporter of military weaponry and equipment. Israel also receives aid in other ways, such as loan guarantees, refugee resettlement assistance, and reduced cost or free military equipment, care of 1033. In addition to $3.1 billion per year in assistance, Israel also receives funds through the Defense Department for missile defense programs like Iron Dome. Again, that translates to a lot of money given to Israel to fund terror in Palestinians, to fund occupation in Palestine. That is eerily familiar. That is the same as the occupation in my neighborhood. To get from where we would frequently protest to my house is 10 minutes max. However, the nights leaving protests, that is a 25-minute drive, because I can't go straight. I have to go around to miss checkpoints, right? Because I know where they're gonna be sitting. I know they know that we're leaving protest. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I cannot be alone in a car or with one other person leaving a protest, passing through a checkpoint. This is also very familiar when I talk to my comrades from Mexico. One of my comrades, Freddie, tells me about not understanding when he was little why his father would always check his watch. He understood as he got older because he was marking the time for immigration to pass so that he could get across and go to work. This is the same as a checkpoint in Palestine. This is the same as the occupation in my neighborhood. So I'm gonna go, I just wanna draw some differences for you guys on the way that things are working in the United States with regards to police brutality. So when I spoke earlier about the 976 people logged so far killed by police and the 8 arrests, these are 2 of the arrests. When police kill people, when police murder people, they should be charged the same way that I would be charged. So I agree that these 2 men should be behind bars or post bail until they get a trial. The difference is this. These 2 arrests came just last week. Norris Greenhouse and Derek Stafford arrested on second-degree murder charges after 18 shots were fired into a van that Jeremy, little 6-year-old boy here, and his father were riding in. Jeremy was hit at least 5 times and killed, his father in critical condition. Police body camera recorded that the father had his hands up out the window and was posing no threat as police fired into the car. Again, if this is true, this is handled as it should have been. The police should be arrested, charged, and stand trial the same way that I would be. The problem is that swift justice, or any justice at all for that matter, only seems to come when the police are black and the victim is white. This is Ayana Stanley Jones. She was 7 years old. She lived in Detroit. She was shot and killed during a raid by the Detroit SWAT team on May 16th of 2010 while lying in bed with her grandmother. The U.S. Representative John Conyers asked the then U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder for a federal investigation into the murder. Officer Joseph Weekly was charged in October of 2011 with involuntary manslaughter and reckless endangerment with a gun. No murder charges. Weekly's first trial ended in a mistrial in June of 2013, 3 years after Ayana had been killed. His retrial began in September of 2014, and on October 3rd, the judge dismissed the involuntary manslaughter charge, leaving him on trial for only one charge, recklessly disarming a firearm. On October 10th, the second trial ended in another mistrial. On January 28th of this year, the county prosecutor in Detroit, Kim Worthy, dismissed the last remaining charge against Weekly, the misdemeanor of careless discharge of a firearm causing death, and there will be no third trial. This is Tamir Rice. Tamir was 12 years old. When he was killed by police on November 22nd of 2014 in Cleveland, Ohio. Very important thing to note about Cleveland, or about the state of Ohio, is that it is an open carry state, meaning I have the right to carry my firearm on my person. It is not illegal. 2 police officers, a 26-year-old and a 46-year-old, responded after receiving a police dispatch call of a male black sitting on a swing and pointing a gun at people in a city park. A caller reported that the male was pointing a pistol at random people in the recreation center. At the beginning of the call, and again in the middle, he says of the pistol, "It's probably fake." Toward the end of the 2-minute call, the caller stated, "He's probably a juvenile." The information was not relayed to police, and officers reported upon their arrival, Rice reached toward a gun in his waistband. Lohman, the 46-year-old officer, fired 2 shots before the zone car came to a stop. Within 2 seconds of arriving on the scene, he'd fired 2 shots. Neither officer administered any first aid to Rice after the shooting. Tamir Rice died the next day. Again, a few things to note. Ohio is an open carry state. So if I am sitting in a park with a gun, it's legal. Secondly, the dispatcher did not pass along very critical information given by the caller, noting that 1, he's probably a kid, which, look at his face. He looks like a 12-year-old. And that the gun was probably fake. This dispatcher had been released from a previous job for not performing properly. Lohman also had been declared unfit for duty by a previous department. Why was he working? The senior chief deputy district attorney in Denver wrote one of the reports and concludes Lohman's decision to shoot Rice as he approached the officers was objectively reasonable. He fired shots before the car stopped in an open carry state where guns are legal. The quote from Sims says, "There can be no doubt that Rice's death was tragic and indeed, when one considers his age, heartbreaking. However, for all of the reasons discussed, I conclude that Officer Lohman's belief that Rice posed a threat of serious physical harm or death was objectively reasonable, as was his response to that perceived threat. He shot 2 times before the car stopped." It makes me wonder why they had to go from Cleveland, Ohio, all the way to Denver, Colorado, to get an expert. John Crawford, this was a fun day. John Crawford, killed again in Ohio, open carry state, picked up an unpackaged BB pellet rifle gun inside of a Walmart in the sporting goods section and continued shopping in a store. Customer called 911. Shooting was captured by the security's video camera. Crawford was talking on his cell phone at the time, so we don't even know that he heard the police order to drop the weapon. As soon as he turned around, the police fired. As if that wasn't enough, John Crawford was on the phone with the mother of his new baby girl, Tasha Thomas, who was threatened with jail time after John Crawford was killed. They interrogated her, accused her of being drunk and on drugs because she was crying uncontrollably when she stated that Crawford did not enter the store with a gun. She was not yet aware of Crawford's death at the time of the interrogation. They did not tell her that he was dead. Following the shooting, a grand jury decided not to indict any of the officers involved on the charges of either murder, reckless homicide, or negligent homicide. Black and Latino men are not the only victims of state-sanctioned violence. Kimberly King, 21 years old, was arrested for a fight, had traffic tickets, so was held because she had warrants for those traffic tickets. She never left the jail. There are 13 cameras in the Pagedale Police Department. There's been no video released. If, in fact, you did not kill her, why has there not been any video released? If, in fact, the punishment for a street fight or traffic tickets is death, I submit that a lot of us wouldn't be sitting in this room. So where do we go after we've sat in every seat? There's always a lot of pushback to the protesters that you guys only want to be in the streets. You don't want to come sit in any of the seats. So after I've spoken to and met with literally every level of government, city, state, federal, the Department of Justice, to the UN, Geneva, to testify for the Torture Council, where do you go after that? I come to you, my global community of human rights activists that know that this is not the only way forward. We understand a lot better than any government ever could that the rights of humans are non-negotiable. People often ask me what justice is, and to me, justice is the luxury of just being able to be. For me, the luxury of being Black, of being a woman, of being heterosexual, of being born in the United States, and not suffering any persecution for any parts of me. I invite you all to stand up and fight for the luxury of justice, for the luxury of just being human. And if you would like to learn more about my organization, the work that we're doing on the ground, please go to handsupunited.org. My email address is tara@handsupunited.org. Feel free to email me. I would love to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much, Tara Thompson. Really,